Yeah, so I would actually, coming back, so I referred earlier to the extent that our current economics or our current system actually is faced with, this multiple crisis, and I call it the six-headed crisis. So we have a crisis of climate, we have a crisis of public health pandemic, we have a crisis of the loss of biodiversity, we have a crisis of social and racial injustice. The fifth crisis we have is one of distrust in international trade and democratically established institutions. And the sixth, last but not the least, is our the crisis that we face in the financial markets, or at least the instability that's currently inherent in our financial markets and our infrastructure. So if we look at each of those crises, we can actually then compare to what extent our economics actually addressed or sufficiently addressed or neglected those outcomes, right? So we can let's take example of the biodiversity. So the biodiversity is an outcome that we have seen since 1945, the outcome after the outcome of the Second World War. We have actually pursued a economic system with full disregard of our nature, or with regard of our bio ecosystem. So there is a total absence of making our economic system nature-centric. Mm-hmm. If you look at climate, the outcome of our climate, again, from the same area, outcome from the Second World War, there has been a full pursuit of growth that was actually backed by the extraction of oil and gas. And this extraction took place with an externality, an outcome, so the carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gas that actually, was an outcome of that pursuit. Yet we failed overall, notwithstanding that we had the knowledge, we had the scientific knowledge, we failed to incorporate that externality into our overall allocation process, the way we allocated capital and the way we allocated that capital in a price, or I would say a carbon agnostic price allocation system. Now, if we take, the other elements we have, for example, the social and racial injustice. The social injustice, I would say, is also the fact, for example, that trade unions have no longer any say. So the power of the trade unions, and to some extent that was usurped. I think, that's also, fair to say, but in essence, the individual employee has no longer representation by a larger group, or a group that is actually representing the interest of that employee. With respect to racial injustice, we have seen that there has been a weaponization of the police force, with somewhat, indiscriminate kind of force being applied to minorities. And so these are, we've also, when we look back at the public health pandemic, we have seen in the run-up to the public pandemic, so of 5 years prior, that the big pharma have actually undertaken more share buybacks, more dividend payouts to shareholders than they've actually spent on R&D, right? So in R&D, including, notwithstanding we have had the issues, the warnings about forthcoming pandemics. So, but yet we still saw these outcomes. So these are some examples where you see that there's been this disconnect between the outcomes that we're currently faced with in the forms of the six-headed crisis and the fact that we failed to address them in a fundamental or a systematic manner in our economic setup.